Welcome to Group. I'm so glad you could join us for this important series launching our vision called Thrive. Our vision is to see people thrive in Jesus as they love, live, and lead. For our first talk, we looked at Jeremiah chapter 29, and we looked at how the Israelites were brought from their promised land where they had built a kingdom, and they thought they were the people of God, so they thought they deserved that kingdom. But they turned away from God, and so God Himself, the very same God that promised them the land, also took that land away and carried them into exile in Babylon, where they were beaten and enslaved. It was there that they received the promise of Jeremiah 29:11, the verse so much of us love. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. When they must have heard that verse, they must have thought that that verse didn't apply to them. Because when they looked out on their conditions, they probably felt like God wasn't trying to prosper them. They felt like He didn't have a good hope and a good future for them. And that's a lot of times where we can find ourselves. We can look out on our conditions and we don't feel like there's anything good going on in our lives. Like God isn't working, God isn't trying to change our conditions. But we also looked at Jeremiah 29:11 in context with verses 12 and 13, where God says, "You will find me if you seek me with all your heart." That word heart is the center of our lives. It's the driving force of our lives. God says, if you make me the center of your life, if you make me the driving force in your life, if you find your identity in me, in my image, because you were created in the image of God, then I will help prosper you and help you have a good future and a good hope. We looked at how that word prosper doesn't just or even primarily mean financial prosperity. The word prosper is the root word shalom, which means peace. Peace not as in the absence of violence, but peace as in everything working well together. In other words, God was telling the Israelites, and He's telling us, that if you know your convictions and you lead from your convictions in your life, you'll begin to see things aligned in your life and work well together. The reason is that when we live from our conditions and how we feel, things seem right, but they might not always be right for us. So we might go into a relationship because the person seems cool or they're pretty or handsome, but then we realize they're a toxic person and they're not the right person for us. Or we might go into a job because of our title or because of the pay that it offers, but realize the culture of the job is toxic, and that's not the place where God has called us to be. When we know who we are in Jesus, we can begin to align our internal convictions with our external conditions, and so we don't have an inner conflict inside of ourselves. I also looked at three things that we're going to be looking at again in this coming series. We looked at the fact that we know who we are not by looking at ourselves, but by looking at who God is. And so we said that God is three things. God is love. And so we said our identity is not based on anything we do, but it's based on the fact that God loves us. We are a child of God. And then we looked at the fact that that gives us the courage to say no to toxic relationships, believing that God is going to provide for us. And so we look for people that bring the best out of us and encourage us in our walk in faith and encourage us as we follow Jesus so that we can have the strength to say no to those toxic relationships in our life. We also looked at the fact that God is holy and that God is set apart, not set apart physically from the world, but He's set apart in the sense that He knows His mission and He is about His mission, and He won't be diverted to the left or to the right in other people's missions. Do we have core values and things that we know that is us and that we can live by character, not by compromise in our life? That we can begin to follow things, because that is how we lead to wholeness, so that there's internal conditions or external conditions and our internal convictions begin to match. Finally, we looked at the fact that God is creator and that He has a unique plan for our life. We were all created with a God-given purpose that is unique to us. And when we begin to serve in God's plan, we begin to see things happen in the world around us and lives changed and made better. And that is ultimately what it means to live a thriving life, that we would love, live, and lead in Jesus. Have a great group, and I look forward to hearing how everything is going. Talk to you later.